Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Jasmine Salvati. I'm a monitoring ecologist at JNCC, and many of you may know me from work either through NCEA or through my work on the National Plant Monitoring Scheme or the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. Today's talk is about building community science. We have some fantastic speakers lined up for us. Just as a bit of housekeeping, if you have any questions, please do ask them at the Slido. There's a QR code and a link that you should be able to click in the top corner there. And then that link will appear again in a second. We have a slightly broader audience than usual. So we have lots of different sort of people from CNCBs, NGOs, our scheme partners. So I'm really hoping that this event will be helpful for everyone. So just a quick reminder, these are the rest of the events, or these are the events coming up. So this is the penultimate event, and then we have one on the 25th of November, which is about celebrations and aspirations in TEPoP biodiversity monitoring partnerships. So please do sign up for that if you're interested, and you can watch our other two events, the science talk on the importance of prediction and the spotlight on increasing biodiversity monitoring at multiple scales, and they are both now available to watch. So because we've got a slightly broader audience than usual, I do just want to give a quick primer on what UK TEPoP is. So TEPoP obviously standing for Terrestrial Evidence Partnership of Partnerships. So JNCC is a common partner across many, many different monitoring schemes, some of which you can see on the screen there. So the NPMS, the UK BMS, the pollinator monitoring scheme, seabird monitoring program, and then many, many different bird monitoring programs, and then the National Bat monitoring program. But we recognise that there are a lot of different challenges and opportunities relevant for engaging volunteers with monitoring, even just one taxon. But each taxon that we monitor is relevant for other taxa, like the problems that we all face, the challenges that we all have, and the barriers that we're all trying to overcome, as well as our successes are all linked to each other. So it's really beneficial for us to work together across this space within the sector. So with all of our partners who work with us on those aforementioned monitoring schemes, we established UK TEPoP, and it's designed to bring us all together through these organisations who are involved in funding, organising, running, steering these schemes to collaborate, exchange ideas, and work together on shared challenges effectively. There's sort of the official TEPoP network, and that has been expanded to welcome loads of other organisations who are keen to collaborate with us and who are interested in sharing ideas with us as well. So there's lots of good things coming out of TEPoP. In the corner there, you'll be able to see a link to what TEPoP is about, which will explain it in more detail than I have just done. So today's talk is very much built on last year's TEPoP DEI workshop. There is a QR code in the corner there, which you can go through to find the report from last year's workshop. Last year, we really focused on how to build strategies and how we want to move forward as a set of monitoring schemes to build strategies to increase diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that really came out through people reflecting on what we're planning on doing is that knowing who to contact is really difficult, knowing which communities will want to engage with us, and knowing where to direct effort and resources is really, really difficult. So today we're planning on kind of answering some of those questions a little bit. We're going to be hearing from two experts in community engagement. I'll introduce Claire and Nazia in a second, but they are two community leaders, and we're going to be learning about different ways and reasons that people may want to engage with us. And a key thing here is going to be kind of stepping out of our own enthusiastic monitoring for science box and thinking about why other communities engage, who they may want to engage with, and what motivations exist across different demographics, different communities to work with us. So it's both hearing about how to engage with different communities and why communities may want to work with us and what motivates them. We're going to be hearing as well about different examples of impactful community collaboration and the ways in which working with us has helped different people get more involved. So hopefully it will be a really interesting and positive talk for everyone. Going forward, I'm really hoping that from this we'll be able to think about different ways of building paths to engagement, and we'll be able to build into our strategies everything that we're learning today about why different people may want to kind of work with us. And can we continue to build connections through TEPoP? So, like I said, we've got two fantastic speakers who I'm sure would be happy to hear from some of you about potential collaborations in the future. So today we will be hearing from Claire Narraway of Earthwatch. She's a research lead for nature in cities at Earthwatch Europe. She also oversees research on the Tiny Forest Initiative, which is one of the key things that we'll be hearing about today. Claire is also the convener of the Miyawaki Research Network, which is kind of a special way of planting trees. And Claire also leads research on social impact of citizen science. So if we're thinking about someone who is a real expert reaching out to different communities, and Claire is our person. Claire is really going to help us figure out how to go about this. We'll also be hearing from Nazia, who is the founder and director of Sustainably Muslim. And Nazia works to help different Muslim communities engage in environmental protection and sustainability work. Nazia has won many awards and been highly recognized for her contributions in environmental kind of community spaces, including receiving the Inspiring Muslim Award for Community, which was awarded to her by the Greater London Authority and the Mayor of London. Nazia also has led the development of the Muslim Climate Action Report, which talks about how Muslim communities are engaging and may want to engage in kind of climate action going forward. So if we're thinking about why people may want to become involved with us and kind of reaching out to different community groups, Nazia is our expert, and we will be really excited to hear from her. So just again, if you have any questions, we will be having a Q&A after Claire and Nazia have spoken. Please do put any of your questions in the Slido. There is a link there that you should be able to click through, and a QR code if you want to scan it using your mobile. And then we also really welcome any feedback from you about this event. So there is a form that you can fill in to tell us your thoughts. I'm going to be quiet now, and I'll hand over to Nazia, who's going to talk to us about her work.
Okay, amazing. Hi everyone, it's so nice to be on this call today. My name is Nazia, and I'm the founder of an organization called Sustainably Muslim. And in today's call, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the relationship between Islam and environment. I'll then talk about the work that we're doing at Sustainably Muslim, and then finally talk about some tips that you can take onto your organizations as well in terms of like how to engage with Muslim audiences. I just want to start off my presentation with the first 2 pages of the Quran. Now, Dr. Ahmed Safi, who is a lecturer in Sufi poetry, mentions that if you look at old illuminated manuscripts of the Quran like this one, you'll see that there are arrows pointing outwards in the margins of the pages. So you can see these kind of larger arrows and these tiny little ones as well. And these arrows were intended to guide your glance off the page and to see beyond it. And beyond the page, we see God's scripture, not written with ink, but with trees and mountains and rivers. And then ultimately, we recognize that the signs of God are all around us and within our own selves. And so just as we take care of our Qurans and our religious books, we also need to take care of the natural world around us. Now, often when we think about a good Muslim, we think about someone who prays 5 times a day, who fasts, and of course, these are incredibly important things within our religion. They're pillars in our faith. But I think it's also important to remember that Islam is such a holistic religion that really provides Muslims with the framework to live a moral, ethical, and sustainable life. And there's no figure that shows this better than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So a few years ago, I studied the Shama'il, which is a text compiled by a man called Imam Tirmidhi. And it's through studying this text that I realized how ethical and sustainable the Prophet's life was. He fixed his clothes when they ripped. He created conservation areas. He planted trees. And he treated animals with such compassion. And I felt that as Muslims, we're quite disconnected from understanding our role in kind of protecting the earth and what we should be kind of exactly doing. And one of the key themes that runs throughout his life is balance, or what we say mizan in Arabic. Now, I have a question for you all, which you might find quite strange, but I'll explain. If you just put in the chat box, I can't see it at the moment. I can only see my screen. But was the Prophet's hair curly, straight, or somewhere in between? Any answers that you think? I can't see the chat box.
We've got 2 votes for in between.
Oh, okay. Any other ideas? But yes, you are correct. So interestingly, the Prophet's hair was neither curly nor straight, but in the middle. His height was neither too lanky nor short, but in the middle. And so all aspects of his life were about finding that middle road, to the extent that even his outer appearance mirrored his internal state. And that's exactly what we need to go back to. Finding balance in a world that encourages us to live a life of excess in every form. We're always wanting more money, more food, more clothes, yet we're never fully satisfied, we're never fully content. And this is a quote that I really love. And it says, the Prophet, peace upon him, would eat melon alongside fresh dates. And he would say, the heat of this cools that, and the coolness of that heats this. So again, he's balancing the dry, hot date with the cold, wet melon, showing us that he was balanced and moderate, even in eating. And because every aspect of the Prophet's life was balanced, he was able to make balanced and meaningful decisions. The imbalance that we're seeing in the world today is a manifestation of the imbalance within human beings. Like the scale has kind of tipped where people are kind of thinking about greed and so on, as opposed to thinking about like the better good of the world and for humans and for animals, of course. Now, often when we think of an environmentalist, we think David Attenborough or Greta Thunberg. But the Prophet, peace upon him, was a really staunch advocate of environmental protection before terms like climate change and net zero were coined. So it says, the Prophet, peace upon him, would enjoin mercy to animals and forbid their owners from starving them, wearing them out, making them carry loads constantly, or treating them in any way that caused them suffering. The Prophet, peace upon him, is described by God as a mercy to all. And it's really interesting that we see his mercy manifest not just to human beings, but to all living beings. And it was really his care and concern for wildlife that kind of inspires me every single day, and what kind of spurred me on to start Sustainably Muslim as well. And what's really beautiful is that the Prophet, peace upon him, explained that everything in the heavens and the earth glorifies God in ways that we may never truly understand. The rustling of the leaves, the singing of the birds, and even the croaking of the frogs are ways that nature praises its creator. There's a verse in the Quran that says, verily in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. And so whenever I'm out in nature, I often think that maybe I find such peace and tranquility because everything around me is just praising God. And so I invite you all the next time you go out for a walk or a hike to think about the sounds of nature, not just as sounds and noises, but as praises of the divine. So thinking about all of this, about the relationship between Islam and nature, is what inspired me to start Sustainably Muslim back in February 2020. And the aim is to inspire Muslims to serve the environment and the community. And we do that in lots of different ways. We do that through events, workshops, volunteering opportunities, and also working with mosques. So our events are really centered around getting Muslims into conservation. It's actually, I'm sure you all know, the second least diverse sector in the UK after farming and agriculture. So we really wanted to help bridge that gap. And essentially what we do is we partner with various conservation organizations and we do collaborative events with them. So in this first picture over here, this is a bat walk that we did with Bat Conservation Trust and Birmingham Wildlife Trust. This is a bird ringing session that we did at Walthamstow Wetlands with the London Wildlife Trust. And we also did guided walks with Epping Forest Heritage Trust as well. So we do kind of lots of different things with the community, really trying to kind of get them engaged and interested in conservation. Our workshops are more varied. They are usually art and nature-based. So we do everything from DIY to upcycling, really trying to get people to engage with nature in multiple ways. So for those people who don't feel comfortable going out for a walk or out on a hike, they can still come into a community centre and still learn and pick up new skills as well. We also have a community garden. So for those of you who are in East London, we are based in Canning Town. And this was a project that was funded by Foundation for Future London. This was, I think, 3 years ago now. And we worked with Neom Council, where they basically had just vacant land. They weren't doing anything with it. And so I reached out and said, we'd love to create a community garden there. And this is such a great way to meet new people, but also learn some gardening skills as well. So just over 50% of people that volunteer at the garden have actually never planted anything before. So it's like a really important kind of skill for them to learn as well. And then we're also working with mosques. So this is the design plans that we created for a mosque in Barking, so again in East London. Majority of the work that we do is based in East London, though there are times that we work in like various parts, like in Birmingham or in South East London as well. So we worked with our horticulture lead, and she designed this particular plan where we wanted it to be a space where the people who were coming to the mosque could enjoy a really nice, quiet place. So we added things like benches and the water feature in the middle here as well. And we also added benches here. And we wanted to make sure that we had UK native species. So we added lots of those kind of plants and trees in that space. But we also wanted to make sure that we had kind of a nod to the Quran. So for example, we added plants that were mentioned in the Quran, like figs and olive trees as well. So we kind of had that balance where people were still able to recognize plants that they kind of read in the Quran as well. With working with mosques as well, something that we're doing this year is we are piloting with 2 more mosques in Southeast London, so Lewisham Islamic Centre and also Greenwich Islamic Centre. And this is in collaboration with Bumblebee Conservation Trust. So we are creating pollinator-friendly kind of areas for them. We've already done a consultation with the mosque and the group that kind of used the mosque, and now we're going to be adding in the plants in March as well, which is really exciting. And then I also want to talk about 2 Billion Strong, which was a campaign that I worked on trying to get more Muslims to talk about climate change. The next slide that I'm going to be sharing is of the video that we launched the campaign with, and then I will come back.
What does it mean to be a steward of the earth? Families are losing their homes to floods in Bangladesh and Pakistan.
Communities are starving due to droughts in Somalia and Afghanistan.
And decisions are dominated by the powerful few.
From wealthy governments to corporate polluters.
But Muslims are left out of the climate conversation.
We make up 1/4 of the planet.
We deserve to be part of the equation.
We deserve to represent ourselves.
We are 2 billion voices speaking together.
Turning up the heat on inaction and shining a light on injustice.
Because peace, harmony, and balance on our planet starts with talking about it.
We are 2 billion strong.
And speaking up is how we make a difference.
So that is the video that we launched the campaign with. So this was back in 2023. And the reason we called it 2 Billion Strong is because there are 2 billion Muslims in the world. And we really wanted like a campaign that was empowering and inspiring to Muslims, where they didn't feel like they were the victims of climate change, even though that is the case majority of the time. But we wanted something where we felt like we were united. And so one of the things that we also did was we worked with Muslim influencers. So in this video picture here, so this is Ilham. She was creating kind of zero waste food recipes. This is someone who created the spoken word piece for us as well, talking about the importance of climate change and looking after the environment as well. Another kind of tactic that we used was also establishing partnerships with various organizations. So Islam Channel, which is the leading Muslim TV channel, and we had the 6 p.m. slot on the Today Show, which is a really important show. And that way we're able to get climate activists to talk about the work that they're doing from a range of perspectives, from activists to influencers and so on. We also worked with the Muslim Vibe as well, where we wrote articles for them and we posted things on social media to try and get more Muslims engaged. And the campaign did really, really well as well. This was funded by an organization called Purpose, and they are a social impact agency as well. I also just want to share some volunteer stories, because I think often with the work that we do, it's really important to hear about what's the impact that it's had. So with all the kind of events, the workshops that we do, it's always great to hear what people on the ground are thinking. So the next slide that I'm going to be sharing are the volunteer stories from 2 of our community garden volunteers.
I came across Sustainably Muslim. I think I was always just like interested in like exploring more like outdoorsy nature sort of activities and like finding communities, and I think I literally just stumbled across like a volunteering thing for a community garden. Like I was aware of them and I've like met people that did a similar thing, and then yeah, I just signed up and happened to coincide with like my faith, which is great.
Started volunteering at the community garden last summer, so around August 2022, and for me it was just a really nice way to meet other people while doing something that I like. I like gardening, but it's always been something that I've done mainly by myself.
At Sustainably Muslim, we have conversations about faith, we touch on it, and we sort of share our different like aspects of our faith and like what's important to us. And for me, joining like the community garden and everything, I've just sort of got a better understanding of where like nature intersects with Islam.
So yeah, it's always lovely when I get to watch that video of our volunteers, Tammy and Bilal. And I just wanted to also share kind of Tammy's particular journey with Sustainably Muslim as well. So Tammy started volunteering at the community garden a few years ago. She used to travel over an hour just to come to our garden in Canning Town, which showed like the importance of creating that sense of community for her, even though she had community gardens that were close to her as well. She then applied those skills to her own garden. So it's interesting. I remember her mentioning that her dad was an avid gardener, but she never felt kind of confident enough to go in the garden and start doing things. So it was only after she started coming to our community garden sessions that she felt more confident. So this is the flower bed that she created that she was very proud of and she sent to me. And then Tammy was really regular in coming to all of our events. She was really interested in coming to bat walks and the other sessions that we had as well. And she joined one of our hikes, which we did in Seven Sisters. And then that gave her the confidence to then join more hikes. She started doing it with other organizations. And then I saw that Tammy was really consistent. She was a really kind of loyal volunteer. And I asked her to become a walk leader for Sustainably Muslim. So this is a 2-year project that's been funded by TFL. It's trying to get more people to either walk or cycle. You might have heard of that particular fund. And so I asked Tammy to join, and she took walk leader training with Epping Forest Heritage Trust. And yeah, she's been amazing. So I think this is just one example of the kind of impact that we want to see on our community, where someone starts as a volunteer, they gain the confidence, the skills that they need, but then they also have opportunities to take paid opportunities as well. And then finally, before I close off, I just want to talk about how conservation organizations can engage with more Muslims. The first one I put down is long-term partnerships with mosques and Muslim-led organizations. I think one of the most difficult parts of working with conservation organizations is that they often work on a very short-term basis with us. So they say things like, oh, can we do one event with you in the summer and we'll see if it gains traction, and if it does, then we'll continue with you. That event goes really well, and then we don't hear from them. It's kind of like they've ticked that box of engaging with a faith-led organization, and then they kind of don't want to work further. And I think that's been one of the trickiest parts of working with organizations for us. And so what I would say is that whenever you're thinking about, when you're applying for funding or thinking about your strategy, is always thinking, how can we create long-term partnerships with this particular organization rather than doing kind of one-off events and projects with them? Because I think that creates a sense of a lack of consistency with the organization, but also with the beneficiaries, because those beneficiaries come back to us and say, oh, we would have loved to do like more events. When's the next one? And then I say, we don't have the funding to do it because that organization's pulled out. So I think it's like a win-win situation for everyone if we kind of think about long-term strategy. Just as an example as well, so with the East London Mosque, which is the largest mosque in Europe. So Tower Hamlets Council actually paid for a role that sits within the mosque. So something like that is a way that you could engage with more Muslims as well. So seeing if you can get like paid roles within those communities. I've also support community-led projects. The first group that came to mind is the Muslim Scout Foundation. These scout groups are always reaching out to me saying they'd love to run a session around conservation, and they're always running for groups to run sessions. So I think that's a definite organization that you could get in touch with. And I think also just providing funding or logistical support for initiatives that groups are running, whether it's tree planting, workshops. I think often there are groups that want to do things like tree planting, but they just don't know like how to go about it. So it's just that lack of kind of awareness and knowledge. I've also put highlighting role models. So exactly like with 2 Billion Strong, I think it's really important to work with Muslim environmental leaders or influencers, people who kind of are change makers within the community to inspire others. I've always found that sharing success stories from the community encourages wider participation. And then I've put make conservation accessible. So what I mean by this is not using terms that people may not be familiar with or sounds kind of too scientific, so they feel a bit kind of unsure about whether they should join or not. So for example, if we were going to do a butterfly transect, we wouldn't name the event that, we would just call it a butterfly walk. And then in the event description, we'd explain a bit more about butterfly transect, and then on the day we'd explain a bit more as well. So anything that kind of makes people feel a bit more comfortable joining into an event is something that is the approach that I think you should definitely take. I've also I haven't put it down, but I'm just thinking about is the importance of location. I remember we were working with an organization that kept suggesting a cemetery, so Tower Hamlets Cemetery, and saying there's lots of wildlife there, which I completely agree with. But it's just not a particular location that lots of Muslims or some Muslims might not feel comfortable joining, particularly during nighttime as well, because that was for a bat event, I believe. So just kind of thinking about these small changes that could happen are kind of the best ways to work with Muslims. And I think also just ask questions, like if there's a Muslim-led organization that you know of, you could hop into a call with them and ask them any questions. That's something that organizations have regularly done with me as well, just to kind of sense check things. I remember there was like an event happened during Ramadan, and people asked me like, oh, how can I go about making it more kind of inclusive for Muslims? And then I gave them lots of different tips. So yeah, asking is always a big thing too. I just wanted to end my presentation with this quote from the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, who said, even if the resurrection were established upon one of you, while they have in their hand a sapling, let them plant it. To me, this quote shows that we should always do good, even when we know we won't benefit from it. We plant that seed knowing that we will never live to see it grow, and yet we're still encouraged to do that action. It also shows that it's never too late to take action, to make a change. I think amidst the uncertainty and chaos of the world, sometimes it feels like there's no point in doing anything. But this quote always signifies hope. And I pray that you all feel hopeful of the future and know that hope is what will keep our enthusiasm and kind of wanting to keep this earth alive. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Nazia. That was an incredible talk. And it actually, just yesterday, I was in a talk about epigenetic myelination and how trees have memories. And when you were saying that, well, memories is an anthropogenic term, but you know what I mean. When you were saying about kind of getting out into nature and listening to the sounds and thinking about how it's kind of connected to a greater divine. I'm not particularly religious myself, but that really reminded me of that and thinking about how we can better connect, but also how we can use those connections to reach out to different groups. So that was an amazing talk. Thank you so, so much. Nazia will be sticking around and answering questions in a little bit. So please do add any questions to the Slido. The link is in the chat, so hopefully everyone can see that. Now we will be hearing from Claire Narraway from Earthwatch, who will be talking about her work engaging with different communities for different community projects. So take it away, Claire.
So thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. Yeah, I'm Dr. Claire Narraway. I'm the research lead at Earthwatch Europe in the Nature in Cities team. And I'm going to talk today about our Tiny Forest project, where we're trying to create thriving green cities for everyone. And a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to sort of have some of the equity and issues around who gets to be green. I'll introduce the Tiny Forest project, how we're trying to engage communities across our network of tiny forests, the successes and challenges that we faced, and some lessons that we've learned. And so something I think that we're all probably quite aware of is that equity around access to green space is not is not evenly distributed. So we've got about 85% of the UK population is currently living in urban environments, but 1 in 3 people don't seem to have access to high quality green space. And this is really much more distributed in areas where the most deprived communities have the least access to high quality green space. And you can see that from this report by the Health Foundation, published in 2024, where about 27% of people living in the most deprived communities had the least access to green space, and only a few percent had the most access to green space when they were living in those most deprived communities. Whereas it's over 40% of people in the least deprived communities that have access to green space, to the best quality green space. And very few of them, less than 10%, have access to the least access to green space. And this is mirrored when we look at the ethnic origin of people. So Black, Black British, Black Welsh, Caribbean or African populations, 40% of them live in areas with the least access to green space. This meant when you've got other ethnic groups, that's about 37%. Asian British or Asian Welsh, 33% live in areas with the least quality green space. Mixed or multiple ethnic groups, it's just about 27%. And it's only 13% of white people that live in areas with the least access to green space. And coming back up to the most access, only 5% of Black British, Black Welsh, Caribbean or African people have access to live in areas with the most access to green space. And Earthwatch believes that the power of nature should be available for everybody. And we are planting more and more different types of nature-based solutions. I'll introduce one of those to you soon in the Nature and Cities time. And we really feel it's important to bring the people's voice to help deliver a more inclusive approach to urban nature recovery. And one of the ways that we engage people in green space is through citizen science, both through monitoring the environment, but also to connect and to connect people with the benefits of the urban ecosystem. And yet citizen science itself is also highly inequitable. So this is a study from 2021, where they called people in the UK and did a phone survey to look at who in the UK had participated in citizen science. And they found that citizen science is predominantly carried out by individuals with more leisure time and more resources. So on these graphs, the black bars here are white ethnic groups, the grey bars are minority ethnic groups. Here it's different, the black bars are urban and the grey bars are rural. But as a quick look at it, you can see that in almost all cases, white ethnic groups are more likely to be participating in citizen science activities than minority ethnic groups. You also see a disparity in age. So in the majority of cases, it's older individuals that are able to participate in citizen science, that they come from higher social grades. That's classified by your job type. That's how that's figured out. And that they're more likely to be male than female. And that this hashing here is when people have participated in multiple different types of citizen science projects. And so at Earthwatch Europe, we want to address this. And we are driven by, as I said, the wanting to create equitable environments and everyone have access to high quality green space. And we discovered in 2020 a new type of afforestation called the Miyawaki method of afforestation. And that was invented in the 1970s by Professor Akira Miyawaki with the aim to create native forests, natural forests, more quickly than you can by traditional planting mechanisms. And he thought this was so important because he'd noticed that ancient native forests were more resilient to the perturbations, to environmental perturbations like tsunamis and things like that, and also housed more biodiversity. And he was an amazing botanist. He mapped all of the vegetation of Japan with a cohort of students and researchers. And he thought it was really important that you select the species that you plant based on the potential natural vegetation of the site. So really that right tree in right place idea. And he plants all 4 canopy layers at the same time, creates really healthy soil, wants to make that soil, decompacts that soil, wants to make it really like an ancient woodland, and then plants the trees really close together, mimicking kind of a light patch in the forest, all the seeds springing up or germinating at the same time, all of the species mixed up together and competing and cooperating space. And so we planted our first forest in Whitney in the UK in March 2020. And by May 2020, it looked like this. By August 2021, it looked like this. October 2022. And then in September 2024, our tallest tree was over 7 meters tall in this forest. And so really these forests are growing faster and supporting biodiversity more rapidly than most forests through traditional planting methods. And as we've been implementing these, we really feel that it's key to bring the community's voice into the decisions around what the forest looks like, what species we plant there, if the forest is there at all. And so before we ever plant forests, we invest in a listening phase. So that involves talking to stakeholders. It also involves going to the community, setting up stalls, saying, what do you like? Getting community to vote on it. We then have a co-creation phase where we co-create, showing the designs, things like that, and delivering the actual local solutions. So planting days, things like that. And then we have an aftercare phase where we support community stewardship and monitoring of the forests. And the monitoring that we do in these forests, citizen science monitoring, looks at these forests as a new type of nature-based solution. And so we get people to go out and monitor the tree growth rates, the soil health and flood mitigation potential, the thermal comfort benefits of the forest, and the biodiversity benefits. And our biodiversity surveys, we have this one in the corner here that looks at the ground dwellers by lifting up these ground dweller tiles, but we also use the pollinator fit count and an adaptation of butterfly conservation's big butterfly count to look at pollinator and butterfly biodiversity in these forests. And finally, we're starting to look at the social benefits and the benefits to people of participating in these citizen science activities. And to date, since March 2020, we now have almost 300 of these Miyawaki forests across the UK, spanning all the way from Jersey and Guernsey all the way up to Aberdeen. And 54% of these forests are located in areas that score 4 or below on the index of multiple deprivation. So really targeting these underserved communities. And about 50% of our forests are in school sites and about 50% are in community sites. And in total, through this time, we've managed to engage over 48,000 people in tree planting, maintenance, and citizen science. And this is really one of the hardest types of citizen science I think there is out there to do, and I probably would say that, but we are creating something new. It's not something that people already have an immediate connection to often, which is why those first initial phases and engaging people early is so important. We also are not the hugest team in the world. We physically cannot be spread across these 300 sites, engaging people in citizen science activities on a regular basis. And so it's really quite a challenge of citizen engagement to get people to go out. And so we've been addressing, we have a kind of two-pronged approach with that. We have our in-person approach, where we run facilitated events. So we have the initial community listening, which is so important, as I say, to getting that early buy-in. We have the planting phase, and then we run a monitoring, maintenance, and sort of training event after the planting day in that first year. And all of this facilitated event is underpinned by a huge amount of desk-based research by our community engagement team, mapping out that community, reaching out to the community and listening and asking what they need, and then tailoring the events to those communities. We also think it's really important to give back that we don't want to be an extractive organisation. We want to be participatory in every way that we can. So engaging in local community initiatives, we go to local festivals when we can. Sometimes that's where we do our community listening, for example, because going to where the community is a really great way of meeting them. This picture here with the wizard in it, that was actually at a local community festival. And it happened to be by the tiny forest that we planted there in Swindon. So we invited this, we hired this wizard to come and do storytelling at the forest, and he told stories around the nature and linked that to the citizen science activities that you can do, lifting up the tiles to discover the world beneath the soil. And we also link with local groups and try and support local communities initiatives wherever possible. And all of this engagement in-person approach, because unfortunately we have limited funding and can't do as much of it as we would often want to do, we then try and sign people up to become tree keepers and sign them into our online engagement approach. So tree keepers are the main way that we then stay connected with people. And tree keepers are local people who sign up to forest guardians, and they can get involved in monitoring, maintenance and community engagement of the forests. And we have a very standard sort of way of doing it. So we have the emails, we have our newsletters that engage them. We have an online Facebook group so that they can communicate with each other. We encourage them to do activities at certain times of year with the calendar, so they can do things when it suits them and link with what works for them. We also have biodiversity week, monitoring weeks and carbon monitoring weeks, so we encourage people to go out and monitor their trees or the biodiversity in the forest. We run training webinars. We host all our resources free online. We do webinars, and we have one next week coming up on our carbon results from our tree survey week. We're currently writing up our 2025 monitoring report, which will go out before the end of the year, and we celebrate them. We bring them together and we have a party. We have also found the power of partnership is so important. So we link with special interest groups, and this here is Goodgym, who are a national organisation that like to do exercise and something good, basically. So they'll run to somewhere where they'll then volunteer to do something good. And this is them delivering leaflets for us. Next to that, we work with a lot of schools. So as I said, 50% of our sites are actually at school sites, but we also invite schools to all of our discovery days, and we have resources for schools to use this in their curriculum and in their teaching. And our citizen science activities can be done from primary school all the way up. And we also involve sort of work with universities, work with all sorts of special interest groups. There's a Muslim hikers group, there's so many of them. And we also help support bespoke projects, like one of our citizen scientists wanted to make a soil moisture meter, so we help part fund that. And then Paul, who I'll give you a little intro to in a minute, he did a tiny tour around a lot of the Miyawaki forests that we have, because he's driven by connecting communities, and he wanted to meet other tiny forest communities, and he ran monitoring events at those forests, and he ran yoga events and things like that. So successes and challenges. So this is a quote from Paul, who I just mentioned. He said, "We gathered to do various activities, including litter picking, carbon capture measurements and bulb planting. But more importantly, it was a chance to catch up and chat with our neighbours and friends. The highlight of the gathering was listening to a poem read by Annabelle about the tiny forest that she had helped plant and look after over the last 2 years." And something I've heard Paul say outside of this quote is that one of the benefits he finds of a project like Tiny Forest is that, and the citizen science particularly within it, is that it's a moment to come back. It's a reason to keep coming back to the space over and over, and that is so important for community building. We found that food and gratitude is essential to community building. Food is essential to conversation, showing care and building trust across all cultures, basically. And we really try and source our food from locally sourced places like the Pod, which is run by Coventry City Council, which is also, they also run the Food Union, and it's a citywide social activism programme. Where we can't all do it from the Pod or Le Cafe, we'll try and find, we've bought food from local refugees who have started businesses in their homes producing food and things like that. So we always try and find a local food source. Harnessing the power of partnership, I've just mentioned Good Gym. We also have worked with places like the Hub at 75 in Hammersmith and Fulham, which is it runs a cafe, but it also runs a citizens advice service, weekly counselling sessions. They let people come in and use their computers and books, and their Hub supervisor was an absolute superstar for us. He delivered over 3,000 flyers. We bought tea at the Hub, and that's where we gathered when it was raining or things like that. And it connected us to the homeless nest, and people came to our Discovery Day because of our connection to the Hub and that organisation. Reducing barriers to engagement is also really important. We're working in some of the most underserved communities, and access to kit like wellies might not be easily accessible. So at one of the schools that we planted a tiny forest at, we organised a wellie donation campaign. So as children grew out of their wellies, could they be donated to that school? And then they would have wellies for all of the students coming up through the years, and it was a sustainable way of reducing that barrier. We also translate resources wherever possible. Our signs in Wales are often now in Welsh. We've translated leaflets and flyers into Urdu and things like that, but that's still a work in progress for us. So is it working? So we are starting to gather more data on this, but this is data from some of this year's events in London, gathered by our PhD student Babette Van Gerwen at Royal Holloway University. And she found that we are managing to engage a more diverse community at Discovery Days than is recorded, which are citizen science monitoring days, than is recorded in the literature as normally participating in citizen science. So, but she did also find that our communities were not fully representative of the diversity that already exists in London. So we are more diverse ethnically than most citizen science projects, and also age. We have more of our participants are between 25 and 44 than you would traditionally see in citizen science projects. However, our projects are still really only attracting the most educated in society, so it's degree level and above. So that's more like traditional citizen science projects, and we are reaching a more female population. A key challenge that we're addressing right now is how do we translate this, and how are we sure that we're managing to translate this success into the long-term monitoring and long-term engagement with these forests. A few quick lessons learned. This is difficult and it can be transformative. In person tends to work better. But when you can't do that, and even if you can do that, harness the power of partnership. Be flexible in your offering. Divya, our amazing community engagement manager here, said something that I loved. The wrapping might be different, but the gift can stay the same. So you don't have to change your citizen science methods all the time. How you package it, how you present it to communities might be different. Be honest about the project aim, scope, and limitations. You're really trying to build connection and build, and being authentic is really important for that. Use community relevant outreach methods, and really don't discount the old school ones. We have had so much success with leafleting and flyering, you wouldn't believe. So really listen to communities and hear what they use. We do always post our events on Eventbrite as well, but yeah, listen to communities. What do they use? Where do they hear about us from? Food at events is a non-negotiable. Provide it. Reduce barriers by translating resources. Celebrate quick and easy access to surveys, timing of activities, things like that. Celebrate your communities. They're doing this for free. They're doing this because they care. They want to know that what they're doing is great. Keep listening and learning and adapting by doing. And one of the last message that Divya sent me away with, and I'm paraphrasing her here, is full ask one thing rather than half ask lots of things. So work out what you think is going to be the most beneficial to your community, what's going to be the most impactful, and really put time and effort into doing that. And once you've done that, you can work on the next thing. And as I finish, I just want to say this work is very little me. It is everyone else here that you can see over the years who have been a part of the Tiny Forest Project and the Nature in Cities team. And Divya and Poppy are amazing community engagement team at the moment. And I would say, if you can afford it, if you can get the funding, and doing this does open up funding and it does open up new research questions and things like that, get yourself a Poppy and a Divya. They are incredible. Thank you.
Amazing, Claire. Thank you so, so much. Both, yeah, that was such a good talk. And I really like what you were saying about kind of thinking about how we package what we're doing and how we kind of encourage different people to engage through sort of dressing the schemes up a little bit differently, maybe not changing them, but maybe just putting a different pair of trousers on them. That seems really cool. So I'm going to invite Nazia to come back on. We have some questions in the Slido. So hopefully more will come. So the Slido link is in the chat, so please do put your questions in the Slido. Or if you're having trouble accessing it, there is also a chat, obviously, in Teams, so we can utilize that as well. So I'm first going to ask a question for both of you. So both Tiny Forest and Sustainably Muslim seem to offer a lot of really different opportunities for people. How do you balance resourcing for all of these projects?
I'm happy to start. I think for Sustainably Muslim, it really comes down to being clear about our mission and honest about our capacity. I think when I first started off, I ended up doing so much and being burnt out. And I think I recognized that there are so many meaningful opportunities that we could take on. But I think now I've thought about how do we prioritize the ones that have the most impact on our community. So I've kind of said no to things that are kind of short-term relationships and thinking about, okay, if there's a long-term project, I'll definitely take that one on. And also just thinking if realistically we can deliver it well. We rely heavily on partnerships, something that Claire mentioned, which is something that's really important to us, volunteers, but also collaboration. So it means that we're not always trying to do everything on our own. And I think working collaboratively means, for example, if we're collaborating with Butterfly Conservation Trust, they bring the expertise of knowing how to identify butterflies and we bring the people. So it's kind of like a really good relationship that we can have. So yeah, and I think just saying not right now, I think is something that I've taken on board as well to ensure that I don't exceed my capacity.
I think that's a really good point, and prioritizing long-term projects is something you mentioned in your talk as well, which I think is something that maybe we can think about more in TEPoP. Claire, do you have anything to add?
I mean, my answer is going to be very, very similar to Nazia's. We definitely, starting off just from the very beginning, what are we promising our partners? What are we signing up for when we plant tiny forests? And is that funded? Is that much funded? And being then very honest as we go and deliver events to the community. Oh, we're coming and doing this one event and we don't have the funding right now to come back and do more. We'd love to, but we don't. And if we get that, we will want to come back and do that. And so just keeping that honestly, relying on partnerships, we are nurturing those partnerships that really that can support that longer term engagement and facilitate that long engagement where there are these win-win situations for the partners and for us. I think that's a really key opportunity, and it has helped maintain longer term engagement at some of our sites really, really nicely. Also looking for different funding opportunities. It really does open up funding opportunities. So we got a grant from the CAF project, the Climate Action Fund, I think it's called, that allowed us to go back to sites that we had planted years beforehand and do more community engagement at those sites and help to build and nurture those communities even more. And we learned so much from doing that project as well. So yeah, being aware that it does open up other funding sources that then can help increase your capacity somewhat as well.
That makes a lot of sense, and I like the idea of looking for different funding streams. It's something that I think we're not super good at in TEPoP, but it's something that we definitely need to think about in the future. So that's a good point. So this question is addressed to Nazia, but I think both of you will have insight on it. So what risks do you see in not addressing representation in the environmental field?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think when we don't address representation in the environmental field, like we end up creating solutions with huge blind spots. Whole communities kind of get left out of conversations that shape policy, funding, climate priorities, even though they're ones that often kind of are impacted by these things most intensely. And I think kind of lack of inclusion lowers engagement, and it ultimately kind of weakens the entire movement. I think we lose out on cultural and faith-based kind of wisdom, kind of the things that I was talking about at the start that I think are really beneficial to people who are of faith or aren't of faith. I think it kind of gives a more holistic approach to looking at issues like climate change. And I think if you don't include underrepresented communities, we risk being treated as just beneficiaries rather than seeing ourselves as like partners or leaders within the community. So I think addressing representation isn't just like a moral responsibility. I think it's also something that's quite strategic. Faith-based and like people of color can build in solutions that work for everyone, and that can only happen if we're all in the room together.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, and being seen as sort of participants rather than just beneficiaries is so important. Claire, do you have any thoughts as well?
Yeah, I would agree again with everything that Nazia just said. The environment affects all of us, and all of the environments that we live in affect so much of us, our mental health, our well-being, our physical health, and things like this. And so it's so important that we all have different stresses and things like that on our lives. And there's much research out there right now that shows that there is just as much valuation of the environment and of green spaces in underserved communities as there are in these wealthier, greener communities. And yet some of the decisions that might be made around the environment and around that might not be necessarily driven by your valuation of it, but by other things. So the Sheffield street tree crisis, there was some evidence that people in some of the more deprived communities, underserved communities, were less worried about the trees being removed because they saw the council was saying, well, it's either the trees or it's the it's other social care that we're providing, and that was really important. And it sets up these disparities that aren't necessarily, that don't have to, it doesn't have to be those choices. So understanding then how you can mitigate those differences and yeah, creating environments for all is really important, and having that broad voice so we understand these different issues and different challenges is really important.
I just wanted to quickly add something as well. I think often organizations operate from a place of fear rather than opportunity. So organizations, like when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, like they were really scared, like, oh, we don't want to seem like a racist organization, therefore we'll try and get like a Black speaker to come in and do a panel discussion and things like that. And I think when you operate from fear, you're always kind of reactive to things like, oh, this has happened, and therefore we'll do this to kind of get people to be quiet and not see us as a bad organization. But I think when you come from a place of opportunity, like actually we can gain so much knowledge from people of color, from people of faith, and you actually are a stronger organization. And I think that's the approach that organizations should think about, like looking forward as well.
Yeah, those are both such good points. I think there's a question that kind of builds on what you've both said really well. It's directed at Claire, but I think you will, again, both have insights. So Tiny Forests gives such excellent opportunities for engagement. With being largely in or near urban areas, have the sites ever suffered from vandalism? If they have, how have you countered this to maintain volunteer confidence to continue coming onto the site? And obviously that's directed at Claire, but Nazia as well, with your community garden projects and stuff, I think you might have some insight as well. So I'll come to Claire first. And then Nazia.
Yeah, some sites have experienced vandalism, and this is a common problem, and what in urban areas in general. And I've had different conversations with people when I'm at that site. So some of them, it's well, this would be it's not. It's happening a bit here, but it's also happening over there, and it's happening over here, and it's happening all sorts of places. So some councils have decided to lock the forests at night because they have a fence around them in the early stages. Others have left them much more open. Creating events and inviting people back to them is something that we've done, and showing people the benefits and how they can get involved in positive ways. I've seen in places where up in Glasgow, there's a forest where they have created, someone built loads of little signposts around it. They've put a bin in it. They're looking after it really well. So encouraging the community to take ownership, to look after it and take ownership for it. And mostly and I think that listening to the community, what do they need support from us from? And empowering them to also take their own action is where we've had most success. But it's always it always comes up before the forest is there, and often when the forest is there, even if there is a little bit of problem, it's not seen as a huge problem generally in comparison to it's happening everywhere in the community. It's just a new site. So I'd say it's not as big a problem as I think we initially think it to be. We're more scared of it than when it's there, mostly.
That makes sense. Nazia, do you have any thoughts as well?
So when I first started the community garden project, because it was the first project I had ever worked on, I didn't know that people like steal plants from the ground. So we had lots of issues where we were planting things, and I'd come back and I was like, oh, this plant's gone missing. And then people were stealing things like bird baths and so on. And I think it was just a really difficult issue where we just had to kind of change where we were planting things, where it wasn't at the front, but we just put it inside the community garden, because there's various sections of that particular space as well. I think it has led to lack of consistency, where the council would say things like, we can't continue doing the gardening sessions because there's X, Y, and Z issue. So I think that's been probably one of the biggest issues that we've had. But we still tried to kind of be consistent, things like that. There hasn't been any major health and safety issues. It's just stealing and so on. So yeah.
And I really forgot to say something that's so important. Everything I spoke about was more about what we do after the forest is planted. What we do before the forest is planted is we go and we talk to the communities, and we say, what are your concerns? What are your fears? What are your worries about it? And we design then the forest in ways to mitigate those up front. So is there a direct line of sight all the way through the forest? Can you see where the seating area is? Can it be seen easily as you go past? There's lots of design things that we can do now that we and build in that are for the community, and where a community has really said, we do not want this here, we do not feel it's going to be safe, we have gone and looked for different sites and planted elsewhere. So I'd say actually before, it's much more about what you did before, and everything I spoke about before was actually after, and sort of solving the problems that can occur after.
That makes a lot of sense, sort of building a solid foundation with the community kind of to help prevent issues. So this one kind of leads off that, and again it's addressed to Claire, but I think Nazia will have insight. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your co-production activity looks like, and how have you shared decision making?
So they've been different in different places. So a lot of the time it starts with talking with landowners and say, what does the landowner think would work in this community and stuff like that. And then we create some designs and things like that often with that. And we've gone into council, into the block of flats, so that it's right and by, and put a stall in the flats, so that anyone who's walking in who lives in that area sees it and can then vote on what they want. We've done events at community areas. We've gone into schools and we've had the school children design the forest. And like they designed it as a heart shape in one place, so they've now got a heart-shaped forest. We asked them what species they want in the forest, so it's about, so yeah, we tend to get sort of the ideas beforehand, looking at the space, where can you actually plant a forest, what are the actual options, create a variety of options, and then go and give those, and because we can't go in person all the time, so that's most of the way that then we're going with something. And we'll talk to community leaders as well as landowners and other stakeholders when we in that initial design phase.
The heart-shaped forest sounds so cute. So cute. Nazia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just similar to Claire, always consulting right at the start with the community that you're serving. So even with the mosque projects that we're working in Southeast London, we worked with the young people and we thought about like, what kind of plants do you want? Do you want English cottage plants? Do you want a herb garden? Like all these different things, like what would actually be beneficial for them? So I think the more kind of data you can get from the community, then that informs like how you want it to look. And then they have a sense of pride of actually looking after those plants as well in the long term, rather than them being like, oh, you just planted this without even asking me, so I have no connection to it. What I would say is like some organizations that we partnered with, they often take consultations very formally. So it's like, let's get this survey and write it down, and we need it because XYZ reason. But sometimes I think just really fun, informal consultations are the best approach to take. So yeah, it's not a one size fit all, I think, with communities.
That makes sense. And actually thinking about informal consultation, that's something that I'm going to go away and think about as well. So I think that's really important. Nazia, are there any barriers to engagement that are specific to Muslim communities that you'd want us to consider?
Yeah, I think a lot of the barriers aren't really about faith. They're more about wider kind of social and economic reality that people are living in. I think many Muslim communities in the UK are dealing with multiple kind of pressures, the cost of living crisis, limited green spaces, which Claire mentioned, and the constant kind of background noise of Islamophobia. I think right now, when immigration dominates the news and Muslims are often framed negatively, I think it creates a huge sense of insecurity. Like there's so many events that we've actually cancelled because of the far right kind of riots and things like that. And that can make people feel less confident in stepping into new places. And particularly when it's a place that you don't kind of feel familiar with as well. So I think climate and nature engagement doesn't sit in isolation. And I think often people think they do. It's always competing with day-to-day concerns like financial stability, housing, safety, simply kind of living and existing, or having the headspace to even think, oh, I want to volunteer at my community garden or whatever it may be. So it's not that people don't care. And I think often, like growing up, I always thought people had this impression that, oh, Muslims don't care or people of color don't care. They're never like volunteering at our nature reserve and so on. They absolutely do. But I think it's just we need to meet them where they're at. And I think the list that Claire gave was actually really comprehensive. And I think all of those things help enormously, like making activities local, free, accessible, close to public transport, scheduling them at convenient times, but also like making them relevant to that particular audience as well. So in one of our sessions, we spoke about plants in Palestine because that was an issue that's really important to Muslims. So it's making things as interesting as possible for the community that you're serving.
Yeah. That's so important as well. Claire, you were nodding a lot there. Do you have any thoughts to add as well?
I was nodding because I just think Nazia covered basically it all. Yeah, I agree with what Nazia said. It's not that people don't care. It's that we exist in this. Oh yeah, there's a lot of other pressures on communities, and it's understanding what they need and how to connect with them.
Yeah, it's such an important point. It makes me think of a talk I attended about engaging farmers and how if we can, like farmers will engage happily if we can make sure that actually they're getting what they need as well as what we need. And that's going to be the same across all groups, but obviously needs are going to be different across all groups. So there's like similarities and then individual differences. So really important to consider that. Talking of sort of asking people what they want to plant and thinking about kind of how we engage with communities. Claire, this question is directed at you, but again, might both have thoughts. You mentioned that tiny forests are based on the premise of native vegetation, the right plants in the right place. When involving the local community in the planning stage, is there a risk that the community wants exotic species, compromising the ethos of the planting?
So again, this is really about that communication before, and that under the ethos of tiny forests, the ethos of the project is that we are creating native forests because they are better for the environment, because they support more biodiversity, so the entire ethos of the project is around native trees. And if people buy into that ethos, when you then show them a list of native tree species and you talk about the benefits of those tree species and the opportunities within those, then that chance is less. We get more questions like, can you not include spiky plants? And in some areas we can, in some areas that's harder. Or can you put the spiky plants all on the outside? And we sort of work with that a little bit more. But there's loads of amazing benefits of a lot of our native tree species for foraging and things like that. And these are ways that you can connect people in with the tree species that are on the species selection list as well. So I think it's about having those conversations, and we haven't ever had a huge push for exotic species. We've had more conversations about, well, should we be planting for climate change and climate resilience? And that's a conversation generally in forestry, and we say that's a really interesting idea and we'd love to do it, but we don't want to be importing species from outside, so we prefer to trial it within the UK by taking species from further south and moving them further north because of disease, because of the risk of importing disease and stuff like that, even though and when you talk to people like that and you talk to them, like, honestly, it seems to go down really well.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, this question isn't in the Slido, but I am going to this question is just from me. So that kind of aspect of communication and working with communities, you've both mentioned it, and you also both mentioned language that we use. I think a lot of the time in kind of the spaces that I work in primarily, we don't always notice when we're using language that may be inaccessible. So do you guys have any thoughts on how we can ensure that our language is accessible for everyone and ensure that we're not accidentally talking about sort of kind of very specific terminology that people won't engage with or won't feel connected to?
Yeah, I just feel like sense checking it with someone who's not in that particular sector is really helpful. So some of my friends are super interested in nature and climate change. Some of them aren't. And I always show them, like, I'll post and say, like, what do you think of this? Or I'll show an event description and say, would you come to an event like this? And then that way I kind of understand, okay, if like the average person feels like it's something that would interest them, then I go ahead. And if it feels like it's too specific, then we always just change around the language. So I think it is something that could be easily done.
That makes a lot of sense. Claire?
Yeah, so we share our stuff with partners as well before they send it out and get feedback on that. I use an app called the Hemingway editor that tells you if your language is too complicated or things like that. When I'm doing myself, I don't have access to partners as much. Talking to people, hearing things, like having conversations like, oh yeah, I wasn't sure if I should come because I wasn't sure if I was a scientist. We used to call them science days, now we call them discovery days. Things like that, like they'll come up in the conversations at events. And it's about trialing stuff. Trial something different and see whether or not more people come, or it changes the expectation. Like, it's about trialing things basically and seeing what works as well. So yeah, those all.
I also just want to add something on like marketing and comms generally, like with lots of, well, not some environmental organizations, like when I look at their social media, even though I care about the environment, I probably wouldn't go to those events just based on the way it's kind of presented, where it looks like a Word document and someone's put like just a title and a random picture. Like, I think things that like look visually engaging are ways that you're able to engage. If you're looking for like a younger audience as well, things that look really interesting is something that is quite important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thinking about especially younger communities who are very tech savvy, I think sometimes they are going to be put off by things that look a little bit unprofessional, maybe. But also, yeah, that point about talking to different people is something that I have friends who don't work in environmental spaces at all, and I do just sort of point at things and go, do you consider that to be nature? What about that massive farm? Is that nature or is that something else to you? So I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, apologies for the cat.
Aww.
She always believes she should be involved. So two questions about monitoring, one for each of you. Nazia, has any of your outreach so far been focused on biodiversity monitoring, and is that something that you or the communities you work with would like to explore?
So we actually haven't done much formal or long-term monitoring yet. So we've run like a few butterfly transects and bat walks, but nothing that's structured or ongoing. But I think there's definitely interest within the community, and it's something that we'd love to explore. It's on our radar. It's just something that we haven't had the time to kind of properly build it out just yet. Yeah.
That sounds really good. And then Claire, also on monitoring, do you undertake any analysis on the monitoring data collected, and do you provide feedback to citizen scientists on the findings, and if yes, how?
Absolutely, we do. So we provide, so at the end of, we have a couple of research for our biodiversity counts, or wildlife counts they're called now. An example of changing the language over time. I can never remember what these things are called anymore. So wildlife count weeks, and after that we do a webinar about a month later with the results of that wildlife count. We do the same for the tree survey weeks, and that's actually next week is our update from that. We also produce an annual monitoring report that we put out every year, and I'm currently in the midst of writing this year's one of that. And that goes through all of the different monitorings that we are doing. So those 5 ecosystem services that we look at. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think on that, sort of on the topic of monitoring for both of you, how would you envision working with TEPoP partners or schemes in the future? And is that something that you are interested in, sort of taking on that longer term taxon specific monitoring?
I mean, I can start, yes. So we already use 2 of the surveys that are TEPoP surveys, POM's Fit Count and Butterfly Conservation's Butterfly Survey. And I want to share that data. I want to and see how it fits in, and so if anyone's on here from that, I'd love to. We are constantly getting asked for different surveys as well, especially around biodiversity. I've been asked for bird surveys, things like that. So yeah, if you see opportunities. I also know that there's sort of, how can we bring in some of the sort of more training, more training means like the quadrat surveys that you do. That would be amazing if we could bring those into urban areas and tiny forests, and of course, and not just tiny forests, we're starting to plant different nature-based solutions. Mostly, how do we get this into policy, things like that. So there's a huge way that and yeah, how do we make our data most useful for policy and things like that. So there's a huge amount of ways that I would love to work with TEPoP partners more, and I will give you guys my email address, and please get in touch, and I'm available on the website as well. You can find me easily. I'm on LinkedIn. Please contact me. I'm very interested in all of this stuff.
I think some people will definitely be contacting you. Nazia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, likewise. I think, as I mentioned, like one of the things that we want to do is more long-term projects. We're actually trying to pilot a 4-month traineeship where you kind of gain the skills and knowledge to do conservation work. So we'd love to kind of collaborate with various partners, think about how can those experts lead those sessions? Are there any training opportunities that we can access, any resources, things like that? I think all of it would be hugely valuable to us.
That's really great. And I think on that, again, it's not in the Slido, but just something that I want to ask. Are there any actions specifically that the TEPoP community can do to support your work? So obviously kind of contacting you, trying to get involved, but is there any like specific action outside of that that we could take to support you? Or would it be kind of a co-development process with TEPoP as well?
Yeah, I think I like the co-development approach where we're kind of thinking about what projects can we work together right from the get-go, rather than an organization has already established a project and we're kind of like coming in. I think that would be really interesting to think about how can we kind of flesh something out together. But yeah, as I mentioned before, anything about training resources is something that is an action that we'd love to take on board as well.
That sounds really good. Claire, do you have any thoughts?
I think so. I think it's coming together and working out how we support each other's activities and where we can add value to each other. And yes, the training of citizen scientists and the training aspects for like our local citizen scientists to do more things like that, and bringing TEPoP into our network as well, sort of joining those networks together and making them and benefiting both organizations, I think would be really wonderful.
Definitely. So I'm going to ask you one last question each, and then one last question for both of you. So Nazia, have you observed different motivations for engagement with the environment for different demographics within Muslim communities? Sorry, that I don't know why that took so long for me to get out of my face. But yeah, so different motivations within different demographics within the communities that you work with.
Yeah, I would say definitely. So our target age group is 18 to 30-year-olds. And young people often come because they want to make friends, they want to socialize, they want to be part of a community. I think that's a really big motivation for them. I think they're also really motivated by this sense of kind of justice and care for the planet. But I think also they want to engage with experiences that they never had kind of growing up. Some of them weren't part of Scouts, or they weren't kind of heavily involved in like being outdoors. So for them, seeing this is a really cool opportunity to just take part in things. With families, I've noticed that they tend to be motivated by giving their children outdoor experiences because they live in London, and they kind of like, some of them live in flats or apartments, so they don't have a garden. So for them to come out on a walk for us is something that's quite important for them. And I think a lot of them have just said they want their children to be away from screens. Some of them are trying homeschooling opportunities, things like that. So it's kind of like supplementary coming to a Sustainably Muslim event as well. And I think I've really noticed that parents are looking for a community to build. So they want to meet other parents that are interested in the same thing so that they can kind of work together. So yeah, different motivations, but kind of the underlying same care.
Claire, do you have any thoughts just to add on to that about different demographics within communities?
I think very similar to what Nazia says, we seem to be singing from the hymn, that people come to events for slightly different reasons, but generally want the same. So families want to get outside, they want to meet other people. People tend to get involved in citizen science events for quite individualistic reasons, and they stay for community. So I think anything you can do to show people that community, to show people the benefits, to tap into those individualistic benefits originally, and then transition them into community, is what will stay people engaged with projects longer. And just making the events fun, seeing what your community wants. So we now have at our discovery days, it's not just citizen science monitoring, it's not just come along and monitor like 10 trees. We have a sort of station where children can sit, they can get up, they can go and collect things from the forest and make art and things like that. So it really becomes this family community activity, which gets people connected to it. And then they might stay for reasons that they didn't know they were interested in, like the citizen science might be it, or they go deeper through the citizen science and they love lifting up. So yeah, there are different motivations, trying to tap into those and give people the experiences, and then showing them those community benefits longer term is what keeps people around.
Brilliant. Claire, this one is a bit specific. The phrase extractive organisation is not one I've heard before outside of mining. What does it mean in the context of citizen science? And I guess then why do you not want to be an extractive organisation?
Extractive means just coming in and saying, do this for us, and not giving back to the community, not meeting the communities. Yeah, not showing gratitude, not giving back, This is a two-way relationship. People are giving their time. They give so much to citizen science, and we need to make sure that they are getting value for what they're doing. And doing that is both for an ethical reason, but also because that then supports us getting this longer term and maintaining these communities and maintaining reputation, all of those things. So not being extractive benefits us as much as it's ethically the right thing to do. So no, it's all about valuing the communities and what they're doing, and not just saying, this is my need, I need you to do this for me. That's the difference.
I will come to a final question for both of you in a minute, but Nazia, do you have any thoughts on kind of that concept of an extractive organisation versus not being extractive, I guess?
Yeah, no, I think the same things that Claire mentioned, and similar to kind of what my talk was about as well, of like being in harmony with nature and thinking about like you're one part of nature, rather than always just thinking of like taking things not just from nature but also from other communities as well. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and final question for both of you. Obviously, the theme of this talk has been community. So in a very sort of broad stroke sense, I guess, what do you think is the key takeaway for both of you working within communities to sort of further environmental goals? And what kind of takeaway would you want us to go forward with in TEPoP, thinking about how we build our strategies?
I'm happy to start. I think the biggest lesson is that working with communities in environmental projects only thrive when people feel a sense of ownership. And this is something that Claire was speaking about as well, that if you listen first, involve them in decisions, and then build on what they care about, that work becomes more meaningful, it's more resilient and more long lasting. So rather than you always having to, like, for example, go back to the forest or go back to a community garden, there's actually like a community that's already doing it because they feel that sense of ownership and that sense of like, I really want to look after this. So community isn't just like an add-on to environmental action, it's actually the foundation that makes it succeed and thrive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's something that I've heard echoed when talking about lots of different groups. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Claire, any final thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with what Nazia just said, and so I'm going to go in a different direction from it a little bit, because I think that's what I probably would have said first and foremost. But I would say we cannot achieve environmental goals without bringing everyone along with us. We need to be bringing everyone, and so to achieve our goals, we have to engage with a variety of communities, and it brings so much value to our projects. It really is transformative. You will get new questions, you will get new understanding, you will be able to go and research in places and understand environments that you would never have access to if you didn't work in those other communities. And so this isn't about how, it's just that remembering that this is something we need to do, and we need to do it well, both for because it's essential to transforming our environments for nature.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you both so much for coming and talking to us today. I think I've definitely learned a lot, and there is a lot that I'll be taking away from this, and I hope that the same will be said for the rest of the TEPoP community. You've both kind of said that if there's any further questions, we can forward them on to you, and you will answer them. So for the people here, if you have any more questions, please do let us know, and we will kind of get them answered. Also, this talk has been recorded and it will be available on YouTube afterwards. So please do share it around, because I think this is something that's really important for all of us to think about a lot more. And also, I am really sorry about the cat. But yeah, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing everyone at the next TEPoP event. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.